Long before the towering ziggurats reached for the heavens, before the names of mighty kings were etched into stone, the world was a place of divine will and untamed chaos. The gods reigned supreme, their power shaping the land, the rivers, and the very fabric of existence. It was an age when the sky was ruled by Anu, the storms obeyed Enlil, and the depths of wisdom belonged to Enki. But beneath their celestial thrones, the earth trembled, not with war, nor with the clash of men, but with the burden of labor. For it was not humankind that first toiled upon the land, but the gods themselves. Yet even divine hands can grow weary. Even the immortals can know exhaustion. And so, from rebellion and desperation, a new creation was born, fragile, fleeting, yet destined to inherit the world. This is the story of the first men, the wrath they unknowingly awakened, and the lone mortal who defied fate. This is the legend of Atrahasis, the man who survived the flood of the gods. At the dawn of time, when the cosmos was still young and the laws of creation were yet to be fully written, the great gods ruled with unquestioned authority. Anu, the sovereign of the skies, gazed down from his celestial throne, his presence stretching across the heavens. Enlil, the lord of the winds and storms, commanded the land, his tempests shaping the mountains and rivers. And Enki, the keeper of wisdom and the deep waters, dwelled in the abyss where the secrets of life and knowledge stirred beneath the waves. Yet, for all their power, the great gods did not labor. That task fell upon the lesser deities, the Igigi, the tireless workers of the divine order. It was they who carved the rivers into the barren earth, ensuring the land would drink. It was they who dug the canals, turning deserts into fertile plains. It was they who raised the foundations of the world stone by stone at the command of their celestial rulers. They toiled without end, their sweat mingling with the dust of creation, their backs bent beneath the weight of their labors. For centuries, the Igigi endured, bound by their duty, for they were the hands that shaped the world. But patience is not eternal, even among gods. As the eons passed, exhaustion set in and resentment festered. No relief was granted, no respite given. The fields grew, the cities rose, and still their burden only increased. They had become little more than slaves to the will of the greater gods. Whispers spread among them, first in hushed tones, then in urgent voices. They gathered in the shadows of the divine palaces, speaking of their suffering, of their endless toil, of their yearning for freedom. Until at last their discontent turned to fury, and their fury turned to action. One fateful night, as the world lay in silence beneath the eternal sky, the Igigi cast aside their tools. They did not bend their backs in servitude. They did not raise their hands to work. Instead, they set fire to the fields and the forges, letting the flames consume the symbols of their oppression. Then, with their numbers strong and their anger unyielding, they marched upon the gates of Enlil's great palace. The heavens trembled with their defiance. The lesser gods, who had for so long suffered in silence, now raised their voices in a single, unified cry. Enough. Enlil awoke to the sight of rebellion, and his wrath was terrible. His storms roared through the sky, his voice shook the mountains, and his judgment was swift. The great gods gathered in council, their divine faces darkened with fury. How dare the workers refuse their sacred duty? How dare they challenge the order of the world? The Igigi had cast down their tools. They had risen in defiance, no longer willing to bear the unending labor demanded by the great gods. The rebellion had shaken the heavens, and the high gods had gathered in council, their fury burning bright as the stars. Yet none could deny the truth. Without the Igigi, the world would wither. The rivers would run dry, the fields would turn to dust, and the grand designs of the gods would crumble into ruin. It was then that Enki, the god of wisdom and the keeper of secrets, spoke. His voice was calm, his mind ever calculating. If the Igigi will no longer serve, he reasoned, then let us fashion another, a race not of the heavens but of the earth itself. Let us mold beings who will till the land, raise the cities, and offer worship to their creators. The gods murmured among themselves. Could such a thing be done? Could life be forged from the very clay of creation? But Enki, the master of the deep, had already devised a plan. He descended to the underworld, to the realm of Namu, the primeval goddess of the waters, the mother of all things. From the depths of her domain, he drew forth the sacred clay, the raw substance of life. With careful hands he shaped the first men, their forms crude yet strong, their limbs designed to labor, their backs made to bear burdens. But clay alone was not enough. These new beings needed more than form, they needed life. And so, Enki called upon the goddess Nintu, the divine mother, the womb of creation. She stood before the gathered gods and performed the sacred ritual. From the essence of the divine, she mixed the blood of a god with the clay. The choice of the sacrifice fell upon Ilawela, a lesser deity, whose life was taken so that mankind could be born. His blood, rich with the power of the gods, was mingled with the earth, binding humanity forever to their celestial creators. Thus, the first humans came into existence. They were neither gods nor beasts, but something in between, mortal, yet imbued with divine purpose. And so the decree was made. Mankind would serve the gods. They would plow the fields, tend the herds, dig the canals, and raise the temples. Their hands would build the grand cities, and their voices would sing praises to the heavens. For a time, the gods were pleased. The land flourished under human toil, the rivers ran full, and the cities rose high. The temples swelled with offerings, and the scent of burning incense drifted to the heavens. Humanity thrived, spreading across the land, their numbers growing with each passing generation. For a time, the gods tolerated the ceaseless clamor of mankind. But as the years passed, the noise only grew louder. The sound of hammers striking stone, the cries of infants, the endless chatter of the living, it rose like a storm, disturbing the peace of the heavens. At first, the gods grumbled among themselves. But none were as displeased as Enlil, the god of storms, the ruler of the earth. His anger simmered beneath the surface, growing with every passing day. The mortals were a creation of the gods, yet they had become too numerous, too bold, too loud. Their voices disrupted the divine order, drowning out the sacred silence of the heavens. Enough was enough. Enlil, in his fury, resolved to silence humanity forever. From his great palace, Enlil issued his decree. A terrible plague would descend upon mankind, a pestilence that would creep into their homes and strike them down in the darkness. Fever and sickness spread through the land like wildfire. The strong grew weak, the young withered before their time, and the streets were filled with the wails of the dying. The people turned to their gods, offering sacrifices, pleading for mercy. They prayed to Enlil, but he did not answer. It was then that Atrahasis, the wisest and most devout among men, sought guidance. He turned his prayers not to Enlil, but to Enki, the god of wisdom and the protector of humanity. Enki, though bound by the decrees of the divine council, was troubled by Enlil's cruelty. Mankind had been created to serve the gods. What sense was there in destroying them? Enki whispered to Atrahasis in a dream. "Call upon Namtar, the herald of death," he advised, "and offer him the gifts of the gods." Atrahasis gathered the people, and together they made great offerings, pleading with Namtar to lift the plague. The god of pestilence, pleased with their devotion, relented. The sickness withdrew, and humanity endured. Enlil was enraged. Mankind had survived when they should have perished. He would not be defied. This time, he struck at their very sustenance. He sealed the rains, drying the rivers and withering the crops. Famine gripped the land. The people grew weak, their bodies gaunt and hollow. The once prosperous fields became barren wastelands, and starvation loomed over the cities like a specter. Once more, Atrahasis sought the wisdom of Enki. And again, Enki found a way to subvert Enlil's wrath. He instructed the people to turn to Adad, the god of storms and rain, with prayers and offerings. When the gifts of men reached the heavens, Adad relented. The rains returned, and the earth was restored. Again, humanity had survived. Enlil's patience had reached its end. His rage burned like the midday sun, scorching all mercy from his heart. He called the gods into council and swore a terrible oath. This time, there would be no escape. No prayers, no offerings, no clever tricks of Enki would save mankind. He would wash the world clean. A flood, a great deluge that would swallow the earth, was decreed. The rivers would rise, the seas would rage, and the very sky would weep in sorrow. All of mankind would be swept away. Bound by the divine oath, even Enki could not openly defy the decree, but he could not bear to see his creation perish. And so, in secret, he came to one man, Atrahasis. In the stillness of the night, the voice of Enki whispered through the reeds, carried by the wind like a sacred secret. Atrahasis, hear me. The flood is coming. Gather your family, take animals of every kind, and build a great boat. If you do not, all will be lost. Atrahasis, the most faithful of men, did not question the words of the god. His heart pounded as he rose from his bed, already feeling the weight of the task ahead. How could he build such a vessel? How could he warn others without revealing Enki's defiance of the divine decree? But there was no time for doubt. By the first light of dawn, Atrahasis went to the riverbanks, selecting the strongest timber he could find. He called upon the most skilled craftsmen, keeping his true purpose hidden. To them he spoke in riddles, saying, "The gods are angry, and I must leave this land. Help me build a vessel, strong and wide, to withstand the wrath of the storm." Day and night the work continued. They cut and shaped the wood, sealing it with bitumen so that not a drop of water could seep through. The ship's frame took shape, a mighty vessel unlike any seen before. It was broad, built to hold not just men, but the beasts of the land, the birds of the sky, and the seeds of the earth. As the sun set each day, Atrahasis looked to the heavens, watching the sky darken, feeling the air grow heavy with the promise of a coming storm. He knew time was running out. When the vessel was complete, Enki's voice returned in the hush of night. "The time is near, Atrahasis. Gather your family, those dearest to you. Bring the animals, 2 of each kind. Fill the ship with food, for the flood will last, and you must endure." With great haste, Atrahasis obeyed. His wife, his children, his most trusted kin, stepped aboard the wooden sanctuary. The creatures of the earth came in pairs, wolves and deer, oxen and hares, birds that took refuge in the beams of the vessel. The people of the city gathered around, bewildered by what they saw. Some mocked him, others pleaded for answers. "Why do you flee? Why do you abandon your home?" But Atrahasis could only lower his gaze, for he knew that he could not save them all. Then the sky broke open. A low rumble echoed across the land, rising into a deafening roar. Dark clouds, thick as smoke, consumed the heavens. The wind screamed through the trees, bending them until they snapped like brittle twigs. And then the rain began. At first, a few heavy drops fell, darkening the dust beneath them. But within moments, a torrent poured from the sky, drumming against the earth like the war cry of the gods. The rivers swelled, their banks overflowing as walls of water surged through the land. From his palace above, Enlil watched in satisfaction. Mankind, the noisy, ungrateful creation, was being washed away. The people screamed, scrambling for shelter, but there was none. The temples crumbled, the great towers of the cities collapsed, the fields vanished beneath the rising tide. Atrahasis and his family huddled inside the ark, their hands clasped in silent prayer. The ship rocked violently as waves crashed against its sides. The air was thick with the cries of the drowning, the howls of beasts swallowed by the abyss. For 7 days and 7 nights the flood raged. The waters climbed higher, swallowing the mountains, drowning the lands where kings once ruled. The gods from their celestial thrones looked down upon the devastation. And then, silence. The storm ceased. The wind died. The rain slowed to a whisper, then stopped entirely. Atrahasis, trembling, stepped forward. Through a small opening in the vessel, he gazed upon a world that was no more. The land of men had been erased, leaving only an endless sea stretching beyond the horizon. Mankind was gone. Only he and those within the ark remained. When the floodwaters at last began to recede, the earth lay silent, eerily still, stripped bare of its cities, its fields, its people. Mountains once hidden beneath the waves now pierced the sky. Rivers carved new paths across a shattered land. And from the deck of his great wooden vessel, Atrahasis stepped onto the soaked soil. the last man in a world washed clean by the wrath of the gods. Around him stood the remnants of life, his family, the animals he had saved, and the heavy silence of a reborn world. There was no rejoicing, only the solemn weight of survival. Atrahasis lit a fire and offered sacrifice to the gods, burning incense and meat upon a stone altar, the smoke curling skyward like a prayer. The gods gathered, drawn by the scent of the offering. They were not triumphant, they were quiet, mournful. For the first time, they saw the full cost of their vengeance. The temples once built in their honor were gone. The songs, the prayers, the laughter of children, they had silenced it all. And in that moment, even Enlil, the great stormbringer, felt sorrow. He looked upon Atrahasis and those few who remained, and his fury melted into regret. "Never again," he declared, "never again shall we destroy all of humankind." Yet the gods feared the return of chaos, the noise, the overpopulation, the strain upon the world. And so, in their wisdom, they devised a new order. Enki, god of wisdom, proposed balance. He introduced limits upon human life, disease to thin the numbers, aging to end the span of years, and barrenness to prevent unchecked growth. These afflictions, once seen as curses, would now serve as safeguards, not punishments, but protections. Hard truths to ensure that the world would never again be drowned in divine wrath. And so, from devastation came a fragile peace. Humanity was spared, not because they were powerful, but because they were precious. The gods turned away from destruction and toward preservation. And Atrahasis, he became the first ancestor of a new race. A reminder of the flood, a symbol of endurance, and the man who once spoke with gods became the voice of humanity itself. The legend of Atrahasis echoes through the corridors of time, a tale of devastation and rebirth, of gods who wielded storms as punishment and a lone man who defied oblivion. His story, whispered in the ruins of long-fallen cities, has outlived the temples of Sumer, the palaces of Akkad, and the walls of Babylon. Yet the flood he survived did not vanish with the past. Its echoes ripple across civilizations, carried in the stories of those who came after. From the Epic of Gilgamesh to the biblical tale of Noah, from the Hindu deluge of Manu to the ancient myths of distant lands, the Great Flood remains. A shared memory, a warning etched into the soul of humanity. But as the sands of time shift and civilizations rise and fall, a question lingers. Was it merely a myth, a story spun to explain the fury of nature and the fragility of man? Or does it conceal the echoes of a catastrophe, one so immense, so shattering, that it was never truly forgotten? Perhaps, beneath the clay tablets and the sacred texts, beneath the riverbeds and lost landscapes of an ancient world, the truth still waits. Buried, yet not erased. The flood came once. Could it come again?
Thank you for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe.